Okay, welcome, friends, colleagues, and distinguished guests. Thank you for joining us today. It has been 4 years since we first gathered for the first Global Refugee Forum. In those 4 years, we have seen something remarkable. Each of us, in our own ways, has embraced our responsibility, not just with commitment, but with creativity. Building new partnerships, finding new ways to work together, it's inspiring. In the United States, we have been asking ourselves, how do we continue to lead in innovation in humanitarian affairs? And the answer we realized was bringing together the brightest minds, the most dedicated partners in this field, and listening, really listening to what they had to say. So today, we are honored to have a panel of such leaders with us. They are pioneers in fields from education to private sector investment, from healthcare in the LGBTQI plus community to tackling the immense challenge of climate change and human mobility. Their expertise, their experiences are not just valuable, they are essential for the work that we do. But before we turn the floor over to these remarkable individuals, I have the distinct honor of introducing someone who embodies the spirit of service and commitment, and that is the U.S. Head of Delegation, Undersecretary of State for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights, Azra Zaya. Her leadership, her vision are at the heart of what we strive to accomplish. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming Undersecretary Zaya.
Thanks so much, Julieta, for that kind introduction in your humanitarian leadership. Esteemed friends and colleagues, it's such an honor for me to be with you today, leading the U.S. delegation to this second Global Refugee Forum. In 2016, the UN General Assembly affirmed the Global Compact on Refugees. Now, at that time, there was an astonishing 65.6 million people forcibly displaced around the world. But each passing year, as we know, sets yet another somber record for the number of refugees and displaced persons. In fact, today, we're faced with over 110 million people compelled to flee their homes due to the harrowing realities of violence, armed conflict, climate disruption, poverty, and persecution. And today, we gather together with a shared purpose to address this unprecedented challenge together. As a global community, we must find innovative, effective solutions and implement them fast. I'm proud to see the United States at the forefront of this effort, but in partnership with the private sector, non-governmental organizations, students, refugees, and everyday citizens to tackle this unprecedented displacement. For example, teaming up with Tent Foundation, joining us today, a coalition of companies committed to giving refugees a fair shot. We're not just creating jobs, we're creating opportunities for those who need them most. From Europe to Latin America to East Africa, the United States and the Tent Foundation are rallying private sector companies to open their doors to refugees, tearing down barriers that stand in their way. Since we launched the Resettlement Diplomacy Network, comprising 7 nations plus the EU last year, the United States is leading high-level engagement among key resettlement states. With a bold annual goal of resettling 125,000 refugees by 2024, the United States is walking the walk on building a more inclusive and compassionate future. Over the next year, we will work hand in hand with communities across the United States to meet our resettlement target and make our country stronger and richer with the contributions of those who have faced adversity head on. Now let's talk about Welcome Corps, a new U.S. initiative that gives everyday Americans a direct line to participate in the refugee resettlement process. This initiative is a lifeline powered by the goodwill of communities, schools, and businesses across America. In collaboration with the President's Alliance for Higher Education and Migration, we're ensuring refugee students have the support they need to achieve their higher education goals in the United States. And when it comes to finance, we're aiming high. During the recent UN General Assembly High-Level Week, I joined the World Economic Forum in calling on everyone, from donors to corporations, to join forces in mobilizing $10 billion in investment capital for fragile frontier markets hosting refugees by 2030. This partnership will empower up to 1,000 businesses to make a difference in countries or regions that are hosting those most in need. As climate change brings a new set of challenges, we're gearing up. By combining humanitarian and development financing alongside other innovations, we're building resiliency among refugees, migrants, and their host communities. In closing, I invite all of us to forge ahead in shaping a future defined by compassion, resilience, and partnership. Our ability to transform the future of humanitarian response lies not merely in the work we do, but in the profound impact we create when individuals in this room and around the world come together. Your commitment, your ideas, and your collaboration are ultimately the catalyst for a future where solutions are achieved. So I want to thank you all for your role as prime movers behind this transformative effort. Now, I'd like to turn it over to our distinguished speakers to learn more about how their innovations are driving solutions and positive change. Thank you.
Thank you, Azra. And now I do want to hear from all of this amazing panel of speakers. So let's start with the person to my left. Scarlett Cronin is the Vice President for the Americas and Global Strategy at the Tent Partnership for Refugees. Before joining Tent, Scarlett worked at the Clinton Foundation, where she advised corporations, philanthropic, government, and nonprofit leaders responding to natural disasters and humanitarian crises. She is going to speak about Tent's fantastic work facilitating employment for refugees and Tent's new refugee employment matching platform.
Hello, everyone. I am the first one up, so I'm the guinea pig to see if slides work, and I think that they do. So hi, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here and to be following such esteemed speakers. I know that we are all here at the Global Refugee Forum because we firmly believe in the need for refugees to have access to the self-reliance and dignity they also deserve, and we want to create the conditions for that to happen. The organization I work for, the Tent Partnership for Refugees, is founded on two foundational principles. One, that companies need to step up for refugees. And two, the most important milestone in a refugee's life in their new country is finding that job. These are the two beliefs that drive everything we do. Founded in 2016, Tent now works with more than 350 major companies in 11 countries in the Americas and Europe to get refugees into jobs or to become job ready. What I want to talk about today is mentorship for refugees, and please bear with me because you're probably wondering how that is so innovative. And it's true that professional mentorship for refugees is certainly not a new concept. There are many great programs out there driven by wonderful organizations that aim to connect refugees to professional support. However, what we've looked at Tent is how to leverage our expansive corporate network, those 350 companies I just mentioned, and put in place a structured program with benefits both for refugees and for leading companies, with the goal of creating as many jobs for refugees as possible. In a nutshell, the way our program works is that refugee mentees are paired by tent with mentors from companies for one-to-one professional mentorship that lasts for about 6 months. We aim to pair mentors and mentees based on a number of criteria, such as languages spoken, location, interest in industry, such as marketing, accounting, healthcare, et cetera. And we provide a range of guidance and support, both for mentors and for mentees, as the program launches and throughout the duration of the program. For example, we provided training to all mentors before they meet their refugee mentees that gives them tips on how to be successful mentors and ideas for what to anticipate and what topics to cover over the 6 months of the program. The topics include things like defining career goals, how to navigate the local job market, including how to think about jobs boards like LinkedIn. I see LinkedIn here, but the many others that might exist in a specific country, just to make sure that the refugee knows exactly the specifics in a particular market about how to be most successful in going ahead to find that job. It's all crafted to best prepare the mentor for that success in getting a job that is either maybe their first job in a country if they're still learning the language, or if they're a bit more advanced, looking for one that is more commensurate with their skill set. So there are three key innovations that I want to point out. First, while the entire refugee population is deserving of this support, what we've decided to do is focus on very specific segments of the refugee population, such as LGBTQ refugees, women refugees, Afghan refugees, Hispanic refugees, segments that face especially high barriers to finding employment, and especially when trying to find work that is commensurate with their skill set. So what we've done is we've engaged the relevant employee resource groups, or what we often refer to as ERGs, at major companies to pitch the program and identify mentors. As you may know, ERGs are playing an outsized role at most companies in order to drive really meaningful employee engagement opportunities for their staff. This approach has been tremendously successful for us. For example, LGBTQ resource groups at major companies have been really thrilled to find opportunities to give back to the LGBTQ community, even if refugees wasn't an issue that was on their radar previous to us bringing this opportunity to them. Second, we have brought the same rigor that we expect of companies who make hiring commitments with us, which is a very big focus of what we do, into this mentorship work. So this means that all companies that work with us on mentorship need to commit at least to mentoring 50 refugees over 3 years. You can think about that as the floor. We often work with companies to do much more. So often this necessitates us at Tent spending a lot of time with companies, with their ERGs, talking through the program, what might the benefits be, et cetera. But what it gets us in return is really committed mentors at companies who understand this is not a box checking exercise. This is a sustainable program that we are setting up with them. And then third, we are creating the next round of refugee allies through this program. One of the most rewarding elements of this program from my perspective, in terms that I was just talking through about the ERGs, is that we are identifying new allies at companies that are now really driven and committed to support the professional mentorship and growth of who they've been paired with. But even more so, we see that companies that might first start by mentoring refugees then often take the step to hiring refugees as well. So just a little bit in terms of our impact. So soon after we launched our first mentorship program back in 2020, we thought we had a good thing going based on the demand we were seeing both from companies as well as from mentees. And so we decided to invest more resources and more support into this initiative. As mentioned earlier, we have mentorship programs focused on different populations. This is active in all 11 markets where we have a presence. We launched our first mentorship program for LGBTQ refugees in the US. We soon took that to Germany and the UK. And then we have a very successful mentorship program focused on women, as I mentioned. That started in Europe. That's now in the US. And we're looking at Canada as well as some other countries to bring that to. So to share a snapshot of the results so far, more than 100 companies are involved. You can see this includes a bunch of brands that are here today, but many others as well. But just to call out a few, it's Philips, L'Oreal, Pfizer, LinkedIn, and so many more. More than 3,800 refugees have already been mentored. As I mentioned earlier, companies make forward-looking commitments. So many companies are now in the process of fulfilling their commitments. So rest assured, this number will go up substantially. We hear from mentees all the time that this very practical guidance that they're receiving and the one-on-one support gives them the confidence to go out and find a new job. And of course, that is what we are most focused on. Results from our Refugee Women Mentorship Program indicate so far that 71% of women that have participated in the program have said the program has helped them to identify and secure that job that we're so focused on. So as we look to 2024, just want to mention that we will be hosting a summit here in Europe where we will be, we do a lot of peer pressure at Tent, where we will really be pressuring companies to step up and to make even more commitments focused on mentorship with that eye towards employment. So that is what I am here to share on the mentorship program. I know there's a little bit of interest as well in a new pilot that we are looking at, which is for the first time putting Tent in the position of directly connecting refugees to employers. So at the request of the White House, that is something we've been looking at in the New York City environment, and are really pleased to see that we've been able to successfully put directly in contact many migrants coming through to New York, primarily from Venezuela, in touch with several employers. And this is something that we are very interested to expand and scale. We are learning a ton at the moment, though, in terms of from the employer side, exactly what information they need, from the refugee side, what roles they want to be taking, other support they need, of course, like English language training. So much more to come on that. And I will turn it back over to you, Julieta.
Thank you, Scarlett. I love hearing private companies talk about doing peer pressure on each other to help refugees. So thank you for that and for all of the innovation you're bringing to this space. Another person who's really involved in innovation is Dr. Miriam Feldblum, who is the co-founder and executive director of the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration. Miriam has written extensively on refugee students and the interface between immigration policy and higher education, and she's a non-resident fellow at the Migration Policy Institute. She is going to speak today about the U.S. Resettlement Program's innovative new Welcome Corps on Campus initiative. Miriam, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Undersecretary Zayed. Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary Valnoy. I'm thrilled to be here. Yes, I'm thrilled to be here. And let me just say a few words about the President's Alliance. We're a nonprofit group of over 550 presidents and chancellors of public and private institutions in the United States who've come together around the immigration issues impacting our students, our campuses, and communities. My role here, as you heard, is representing the consortium of organizations working with the U.S. Department of State to implement what is a transformational program for U.S. higher education and refugee students. It's called Welcome Corps on Campus. Before I delve into Welcome Corps on Campus, let me take a step back and lay out the 3 takeaways I want to share with you today. First, why the work to enroll refugee students is a talent imperative. Second, the exciting initiative of Welcome Corps on Campus. Third, the ecosystem of collaboration and partnerships that are making both refugee student enrollment and higher education engagement in refugee resettlement possible today. During this time of historic displacement, access to higher education for refugee students remains woefully low. Currently, only 7% of refugees globally are able to access higher education, compared to approximately 40% of non-refugee pairs. Since UNHCR launched its ambitious goal to reach 15% of refugees accessing higher education by 2030, the 15 by 30 goal you may have heard about, there has been progress. In fact, from 2019, where it was 3%, it's now more than doubled to 7%. But we have a long way to go. working together not only in the United States, but across countries and all of our colleges and universities, we have the capacity to meet and exceed that goal. Over the past 3 years, the President's Alliance have been working with hundreds of our member institutions to enroll and support refugee and displaced students through providing practical resources, rapid response actions, policy advocacy, and key connections with partners. We do this alongside refugee student leaders and other organizations. This is an investment in talent and the future. Universities understand that diversity and talent around the world drive excellence and innovation. Yet, the barriers refugee students face in trying to access higher education are tremendous. And a structured pathway with durable protections for refugee students to access higher education in the US has not existed up to now. While a number of refugee students have been able to come to the US as international students, for them, getting here and staying here is full of hurdles. The US international student visa is temporary and a non-immigrant visa. Even here, though, the drive and determination of refugee students and the engagement of colleges and universities is clear. My organization, with Duolingo English test, released a new groundbreaking report a couple of weeks ago that shows that there are upwards of 54,000 international students who are here in the US, who are nationals of 22 countries of origin that have been identified by UNHCR, OECD, the US government, as countries of origin for refugees and displaced individuals. These students, along with the small number of international students who are stateless, account for approximately 5% of all international students in the US in 2022-2023. Now, not all the students from those countries are clearly refugees, but a good number of them are. Now is the time to grow the education opportunities in the US and elsewhere to the next level. Imagine if there's a structured education pathway and durable protections for these refugee students who are now entering as international students, and for others who couldn't overcome the barriers. Imagine if they were able to enter the US as refugees on an education pathway with the path to citizenship. This is why the launch of Welcome Corps on campus is so welcomed and needed. This is a historic and profound opportunity for institutions and for students. The interest and willingness of university leaders and communities in the US is real and palpable. Not mentioning all the hundreds who've been working to enroll students refugee students as international students. 3 years ago, we brought together a broad coalition of campus and student leaders, global humanitarian, refugee, and immigration experts, and philanthropic changemakers who generously lent their time, their hard-gained expertise and energy to provide support for an initiative to advocate for university sponsorship. We're now thrilled, grateful, and ready to implement Welcome Corps on campus, which enables campuses to do this. With Welcome Corps on campus, refugee students will be resettled through the US Refugee Admissions Program, admitted as first-year undergraduate students to obtain a higher education degree, and access a durable pathway to citizenship. They are students and newcomers. Importantly, they're welcomed by campus sponsors who provide academic, financial, and integration support, even as the refugee students are bringing their talents and ideas and experiences to the campus and communities. For campuses, we move from emergency and ad hoc responses to sustainable infrastructure. For refugee students, to sustainable and durable solutions. Welcome Corps on campus is truly a public-private partnership with a diversity of partners and organizations. The State Department is funding the consortium of organizations to implement the infrastructure of the program, while campuses, campus communities, and the private sector secure funding, and commit to sponsoring the students. You may have noticed that we have included in the consortium Canadian partners. Private sponsorship of refugee students is not a new idea. But with Welcome Corps on campus, we're learning from others, creating new models, and driving and expanding better solutions. And in the 21st century, we can work together to make refugee student sponsorship a global reality. And let me interject a personal note here. As a daughter of a refugee, of a Holocaust survivor, who was the only survivor of his immediate family, who was able to come to the US after World War II because an educational institution supported his continuing education studies, this is full circle. My father said education saved his life, and he never stopped paying it forward. While Welcome Corps on campus is starting small, our ambitions are bold. There are approximately 4,000 colleges and universities in the US, and many of those campuses have the potential to be resettlement campuses, to borrow a phrase from my colleague, Dia Abdo. So this brings me to my final point, which is that colleges and universities in the US, but also around the world, are exceptionally positioned to provide not only this life-saving opportunity for and with refugee students, but also to do so much more to increase our capacity to welcome and integrate refugees. In the US higher education institutions, we have robust ecosystems, living learning communities with many services. Colleges and universities are already welcoming refugee students and scholars. Many are providing workforce development and training. Some are already housing refugee families. All are supporting their local communities. Encouraging and enabling colleges and universities to more fully engage in refugee resettlement, become resettlement campuses, is a burgeoning ecosystem of collaboration and innovation. And this can mean enrolling refugee students, housing refugee families, implementing language and training programs, incubating entrepreneurial ventures, collaborating with refugee resettlement organizations and community organizations, and more. Importantly, another State Department funded consortium, which is called Supporting Higher Education in Refugee Resettlement, or SHARE, is focused on creating more resources and opportunities for campuses to do just that. The President's Alliance role in SHARE is as an aggregator and connector of this ecosystem, and to create on our higher ed immigration portal a one-stop go-to place for all the resources and opportunities for campuses. Check out the portal. I think it could provide some resources for you as well. And so let me end with this. Faced with growing and historic displacement and global crises, no one campus can do everything, but every campus can do one or two things. These public-private partnerships help spur, implement, and inspire more partnerships. With a global 15 by 30 goal and nearly 4,000 colleges and universities in the US, we're committed to the life-changing potential of refugee student sponsorship and the vision of resettlement campuses. Join us, partner with us, support us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miriam. We told you we were going to talk about strategic partnerships, innovation, and solutions. So far, we've talked about jobs and education, but now let's talk about social impact investment. Danny Cutherall is the Refugee Investment Network's Director for Africa. Danny is an experienced project manager and team builder who has led programming supporting forcibly displaced people across Africa and South Asia. And he is going to speak to us about his experience with social impact investment in refugee areas. Danny, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Thanks for that introduction. My name is Danny Cutherall. I am the Africa Director for the Refugee Investment Network. And today, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what RIN, the Refugee Investment Network, does, talk a little bit about Refugee Lens investment. But I'd also like to talk a little bit about some of the barriers that we face when we try to promote Refugee Lens investment and how we can overcome them by working together with the private sector, with government entities like PRM, and with governments. So to start with, to introduce you to Refugee Lens investment, instead of telling you about it, I'm going to show you what it looks like. We've got a short video here, and by showing you the video, that will be both more interesting for you and less work for me. So next up, let's see if we can get this to work, and then I'll pick up where this video leaves off.
Forced migration is a massive challenge that intersects with almost every major development goal. Limiting human progress in health, climate change, poverty reduction, human dignity, and global security and stability. Over the past decade, the number of forcibly displaced people has more than doubled to over 100 million for the first time on record. While foreign assistance and humanitarian aid are vital in emergency contexts, neither are sustainable in the long term or capable of providing the scale of financing needed to solve this growing crisis. We believe that private sector solutions that invest in the potential of displaced people and the communities that host them will lead us towards a more inclusive future.
Refugees face a lot of challenges building their new lives in host countries, including restrictive economic policies, challenges integrating into new communities, and then also the high perceived risk from employers.
Wakati tulifika Uganda toka Congo, tulikuwa tunataka kazi, but hawakutupatia hiyo opportunity ya kutumika nao kwa sababu wanajua sisi tuko wakimbizi.
Livara started in 2013 with just 3 employees and selling our products online. And now we have 6 locations to which we have 4 huge salons attached. And we have over 64 employees. The decision to hire and train refugees has been a very good decision for Livara. Customers seek out the services of our skilled workforce. So you find that our salon is known to have the unique Congolese kind of styles. We wouldn't be where we are today without the help of the refugees.
The narrative around refugees is changing. Leading investors are starting to see the entrepreneurial power behind forcibly displaced populations, that they are resilient, resourceful, and great investment partners. Together with humanitarian groups, policymakers, and displaced people themselves, the Refugee Investment Network is working to bridge the gap between this growing field of investors and the largely untapped ecosystem of refugee entrepreneurs and ventures. But what is a refugee investment? RIN created the Refugee Lens to answer this question. The Refugee Lens is an investing framework to qualify and track refugee investments over time. The lens provides investors with a tool to intentionally assess and qualify prospective and past deals as Refugee Lens investments. There are 6 different categories that an enterprise can be classified within to be considered a Refugee Lens investment.
Currently, refugees make up 22% of our workforce, qualifying us as an R3 company. Within the next 5 years, we hope to open up to 50 salons through the franchising model. So working with refugees is important for our growth plan, and we shall continue investing in refugees. To others in the business community, I would say that the opportunity is there and the time is now to invest in refugees.
New narratives, inclusive economic policies, and bold partnerships are moving forward as the field of refugee lens investing grows. Ultimately, we believe that together with RIN's network of partners, we can achieve a world in which inclusive economies are celebrated locally and unlocked globally, driven by capital that promotes sustainable solutions to forced displacement and enables self-reliance for millions. Learn more at refugeeinvestments.org.
All right, so that gives you a little bit of a more colorful picture, I suppose, of what constitutes a refugee lens investment and what we at RIN do. In the process of promoting refugee lens investment over the last few years, RIN has consistently found that the biggest barriers are not a lack of investors willing to take on the risk of investing in these companies, or for that matter, a lack of entrepreneurial spirit among refugees. It's not a lack of companies that are investable that are working within refugee communities. The biggest barriers tend to be those put in place by governments that limit refugee economic engagement. These laws are often put in place for, in theory, good reasons. They have good intentions behind them. The idea is to protect the local community, local jobs, that sort of thing. But many studies have now shown, and RIN's own experience confirms that the opposite is in fact true, that by economically integrating refugees into the host community population, there's significant benefits to refugees themselves, obviously, but to the host community, and more than that, to the host community's government, as the burden of hosting refugees reduces somewhat. And finally, there's a benefit to the way that donor funding is used. It allows donor funding to, especially humanitarian funding, to be allocated towards the most acute crises. So for all of those reasons, we firmly believe that economic integration is critical and something we need to continue to promote. So to this end, RIN is very excited to be working to partner with PRM, the U.S. State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, in 2024 on a project in northern Kenya, where we'll get to measure the impact of the government of Kenya's recent and very laudable steps to improve refugee economic integration, both through the Refugee Act that was passed a couple of years ago, and by a recent decision to recognize refugee IDs in terms of using them to access some government services and to, say, open bank accounts and get access to digital financial services like M-Pesa. It's a really big step, and we're going to get to measure that impact over the coming months. But we're going to go a step further, and we're going to source and identify the private sector actors that can step in and start engaging refugees as customers, as suppliers, and as employees as those refugees move from the informal to the formal sector. We're really excited about the prospect of this work, combining engagement with the private sector, with the Kenyan government, and with PRM. And we'd love to do more of this, both in Kenya and around the world, everywhere we work. And if you're interested in doing more of this work, get in touch. We'd love to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. And now let's stay with the theme of the private sector and how the private sector can engage. So I'd like to invite Yumoke Yugun Donkumu. Did I say that right? I'm trying. Yumoke from the International Finance Corporation. She's their Chief Investment Officer and Head of Fragility for Africa. And Yumoke previously served as IFC's Regional Director for Eastern Africa, where she led a strategy implementation and operational oversight. Her remarks will spur us to think about how we can scale private sector opportunity in fragile contexts.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Oh, afternoon. Okay. My name is Jumoke Jagundokumu. I lead IFC's work in fragile, conflict-affected, and forced displacement contexts in Africa. I was born in Nigeria, but currently live in Kenya and work across Africa. For the next 7 minutes or so, I'd like to take you to the Kakuma refugee camp in northwest Kenya. Kakuma is one of the largest refugee camps in Africa and is home to over 270,000 refugees and asylum seekers. The camp sits in Turkana County, Kenya's northernmost county, and it expands for over 77,000 square kilometers across dusty, dry terrain. The Kakuma refugee camp has grown exponentially since the early 1990s. The camp and its host community have become socio-economically interdependent, and refugees and the local residents of Turkana County trade and work alongside and hire each other. The camp is an example of how private sector solutions can help refugees and the communities that host them become economically interdependent and flourish. You were told I am from the IFC. IFC is the largest provider of financing to the private sector in emerging markets. In our last, technical glitch. In our last fiscal year, which ended in June 30, IFC made 11.5 billion in investments in Africa, and it's our largest ever annual commitments on the continent. Now, these are just the Africa figures. Embedded in IFC strategy is the belief that the private sector is critical to supporting refugees and lifting them out of poverty and ensuring that together with the host community, they can thrive. As most of you in this room know, many of the countries that host refugees themselves are already in fragile contexts. This means that they do not have the public resources to absorb waves of new arrivals and to provide the services they need. Let me give you an example. In the 6-month period between April and October this year, over 400,000 Sudanese refugees crossed the border into northeastern Chad. Chad is a country that in 2022 ranked as 185th out of 186 countries, second from the bottom, on the Human Development Index. The absence of public resources means that the provision of goods and services to refugees is primarily delivered by humanitarian agencies. But this predominantly humanitarian approach to assisting refugees is not sustainable. It has never been, and it is now increasingly no longer sustainable. What is more sustainable is integrating refugees and host community economics and embracing an approach to local economic development where we treat refugee hosting areas as a dynamic marketplace in which both refugees and hosts participate. That is my message to you today. Refugee communities are vibrant, dynamic marketplaces that have the potential to contribute to the economies of their host countries. Let's go back to Kakuma. I'd like to introduce you to Fabrice Kitala Mupenge and Olivier Itulabwami. When Fabrice and Olivier, refugees from the DRC, walk the busy streets of the Kakuma refugee camp, many call out to them with an affectionate nickname, Wi-Fi boys. Together, the two are helping to bring affordable, accessible internet to their community through YComNet Solutions, a company they created, which is the first internet provider in the Kakuma refugee camp. Their entrepreneurial spirit and their desire to improve lives in Kakuma led them to launch their company in 2019 with only 10,000 Kenya shillings. That's equivalent to about $65. Today, they have a thriving internet cafe, and they've built a cell tower and are building the next 2 or 3 to extend internet coverage to other businesses in the camp and to the community outside the camp. Some businesses are getting internet service from them for the very first time. IFC provided financing to Fabrice and Olivier through the Kakuma Kalobeye Challenge Fund, or KKCF, our first refugee-focused private sector development program in sub-Saharan Africa. Since 2019, KKCF has provided, at the last count, 122 businesses like YComNet with finance and business advice. Businesses we've supported currently provide services like access to electricity, healthcare, pharmaceutical services, and more to over 73,000 people. The businesses have created about 300 direct jobs, which don't include indirect and induced jobs. The jobs created, about well over 2/3 are held by women and about 1/3 by refugees, because the program is explicitly for both refugees and the host community. We are demonstrating how private sector solutions and financing at small scale and at a large scale can create a new narrative in fragile contexts, one where small businesses and entrepreneurs have access to the tools that can help them grow and foster economies that are self-reliant. Today, Kakuma is a marketplace with over $56 million annual consumption. Programs like Kakuma are becoming increasingly important. By 2025, a majority of the world's extreme poor is projected to live in fragile, conflict-affected settings. The number of forcibly displaced people is also growing. In 2023 alone, over 110 million people were forced from their homes, making the global refugee crisis one of the most challenging crises of our time. The domestic private sector in the countries that refugees move to account for about 80% of employment in this context. However, the local economic development in refugee hosting areas remains a challenge. There are 4 ways to help. First, tailor the private sector response to the refugee setting. Each refugee context is different. For example, Jordan and Kenya host large refugee populations. The Al-Zatari camp in Jordan has a mostly homogeneous refugee population. However, Kakuma is home to peoples from over 9 countries. If you think about the socioeconomic challenges that bring in, that needs to be factored in. So, tailor solutions to the need of the populations being served. Second, obtain reliable market information. There are multiple studies produced by humanitarian agencies on livelihood activities available in refugee settings. However, only very few of them assess communities with an investment or commercial viability lens. Producing the Kakuma as a marketplace study in 2018 was the first step in figuring out how the private sector could thrive there. Third, prioritize boots on the ground. Having local resources in fragile settings or refugee hosting areas has been critical in building the effectiveness of our programs in Kakuma and other fragile, affected, and forced displacement contexts. This boots on the ground, then understand the nuances and give you a map of the sorts of conflict sensitivity analysis that you would need to ensure you build into any program starting and moving forward. Fourth, assess the cost of doing business in fragile, conflict-affected, and forced displacement situations. Working with the private sector in these settings can be resource intensive. Remoteness, security concerns, complex regulatory environments, Danny mentioned it earlier, skills shortages, and other factors add to the costs of doing business, or different skills and regulatory challenges. Mitigations of these risks often requires concessional finance provided by donors or foundations to be blended with commercial finance. The blended finance model encourages firms to enter the market by decreasing buying down some of the risk of their investments and improving the commercial conditions. Finally, in putting together this concessional finance, ensure that it is minimal concessionality that is applied, because we really want to avoid distorting the market, and we do not want to create a situation where the private sector in this market is dependent on subsidies to survive.
Okay, thank you so much for telling us about the Wi-Fi boys and about how the IFC is making it possible to create more Wi-Fi boys. I'm going to have to move us on to our next panelist because time is running out. Unfortunately, we started a little bit late, but we need to stay with time. So thank you so much, Imoke.
The final thing is partnerships.
Partnerships.
All of us together.
All of it.
Make that
Fantastic.
happen.
Thank you. So we heard about jobs, we heard about education, we've heard about private sector investment, but there's one voice that we haven't heard from yet, and we're going to hear from them now, and that is the refugee voice. I am so pleased to introduce Emma Yaka, who is an advisor. He's an advisor to the U.S. Refugee Advisory Board and a delegate for the Refugee Congress. He is a resettled refugee with background in healthcare. He is a prominent advocate for the LGBTQI plus community in Uganda who resettled to the United States in 2017. And he's going to speak to us about his journey and his experiences along the way.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Undersecretary there, Assistant Secretary Noise, and esteemed colleagues and friends in the room, you are most welcome. It's an honor to be here, sharing insights and forging innovative pathways towards together. I'm here today to share a story, a journey of resilience, and a hope that reflects not just my life, but the lives of many. My journey starts from Uganda, simply for being who I am. Part of me being part of LGBT community forced me to leave my country and went to nearby country, which was Kenya, Nairobi. I first thought of Kenya as a neighboring country that I went to seek protection. Eventually, I was resettled in United States. And this year, that journey concluded with a milestone of becoming citizen of United States. Thank you. A five-year journey that has been nothing short of transformative. Yesterday, I think it was my birthday. Thank you. But I've never celebrated my birthday because my parents never told me when I was born. It feels weird to celebrate a day when you don't know for sure. This is a common thing for refugees who often don't know their birthday, while birthdays are a big deal to some of people like you. But to me, it's just a reminder of not knowing my day. In my work, fueled by passion, born of life, experience, I've come to realize that being a refugee imparts wisdom akin to earning a degree. That a degree that has no certificate because it's a long journey. Let us be clear. The path of refugee is fraught and dangerous, often requiring imagination, creativity, and a resilience to survive. When I fled Uganda due to persecution, seeking asylum in Nairobi, Kenya, I was confronted with the harsh reality that safety is more than a feeling. It's a condition that bounds food, shelter, legal support, and a mental well-being. This experience shaped not only who I am today, but how the problem of displacement. Working alongside organizations like Refugee Point in Kenya, Nairobi, I focused on aiding the most marginalized among us, particularly the LGBTQ community. That I was part of it. In the moment of crisis, these individuals often face the brunt of persecution, a reality I know all as well. The global landscape of refugee resettlement is changing. Traditional avenues are narrowing. With it, and the hopes of many. It is a hard truth, one that often leads the most vulnerable back into a harm's way. However, my own resettlement journey in the United States, supported by compassionate Americans who are here today, brought a renewed sense of safety and belonging, a feeling that I had eluded me for years. America, to me, is home now. I'm proud to be part of the America story. For the fundamental strength of America is in diversity and the courage inherent in the story of its people. Today, my advocacy continues with a great passion. Through my work with the Refugee Congress, Heartland Alliance, Rainy Borere, Road, and other organizations, I'm contributing to building programs that I once needed. Program like the Welcome Corps, or Welcome Corps, a visionary private sponsorship initiative spearheaded by Assistant Secretary Noyes and her team, are steps towards this reimagination. I know some of key speakers talked about this, and I'm on grassroots trying to implement this program. I'm so happy to be part of this discussion today, reimagining how we work on the complex challenges of displacement. And I'm pleased to join my colleagues here today towards a response that meets the urgency of our times with bold action, strategic collaboration, and innovative solutions. We need reimagination of a system to ensure swift and reliable protection for those in search of safety, especially the most marginalized individuals. As I close, let me acknowledge my colleagues on the board whose inspiration fuels my commitment every day. That's sitting in front of me. Thank you very much. Our story may often sounds different, but we all share the same dream of belonging and uniting as refugees across the world. Friends, thank you very much for your attention. I'll be sitting there. If you have questions, please feel free to post to me. I'm so excited to be here and to be part of this discussion. Thank you very much.
Emma. Emma, thank you so much for reminding us why we all do what we do and how all of the initiatives and the solutions that we are trying to put forward and the innovations are for you and people like you. And it's so wonderful to hear how you're paying it forward for those who come next. That is the story of refugees in America. So thank you. I'm now excited to introduce Rania Ahmed. She is going to talk to us about another area where we have a lot of innovation and new activities going on. Rania is the Director of Peace and Development Coordination at the International Organization for Migration. She has more than 25 years of experience in humanitarian response, development, and management. She's worked with the UN, with NGOs, with donor agencies, the Red Cross and the Red Crescent Society. And she is going to share her thoughts about climate mobility. Rania, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've done it all. No, respectful panelist, Undersecretary General Zia, friends and colleagues in the room, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. First of all, let me start by thank Emma for sharing his story and for being such a brave person to come with all of us and share that. So thank you so much for this. And actually, I know it's been a long day, and I wanted to start my intervention by telling a story. It's not my story, but it's a story of someone I met, Nadia. I met Nadia in one of the returnee villages called El Bab in Aleppo in Syria, exactly a year ago. And Nadia is a grandmother for 3 children. The parents of the children irregularly migrated somewhere. Some of them went as refugees, some irregularly migrated, trying to find support to the family back in Syria. Nadia has been multiple displaced in the country. So she moved from one place to another in a country that's suffering with multiple crises, protracted crisis, pandemics, economic situation, but over and above climate situation, severe droughts. The village I visited, I still cannot imagine how people are living there, how children is surviving there. When I asked Nadia how they are surviving, she showed me the house she returned back to with half roof. No infrastructure, no electricity, no school system, and no healthcare. And when I asked her how they are surviving, she said, and what she needs from the humanitarian sector. She said, we don't need the bag of food, we don't need the bottle of water, and we don't need any more blankets and hygiene kits. We need underground water to grow the land, to feed my grandchildren. There is a factory at the end of the village. Fix the factory, bring electricity, let my son come back to work here where he can afford for us to survive. And actually, this was very inspiring discussion for me. Because yes, the old way of responding to displacement, to crisis, to disaster, to conflict is not working anymore. I just came back from COP, and I think it's been proven as part of the discussion that it's not working anymore. We have to change our way of thinking, change our solutions, change our innovation, and we cannot do it alone. We have to do it with everyone in the room and beyond. We have to do it with refugees and migrant groups who have the problem and they know the solution but need our support. We have to do it with member states and government, with civil societies, with women groups, with young people, but with private sector, with institutional banking, with donors. We all have to come together, and with academia and science. Otherwise, Nadia and millions like Nadia around the globe will continue struggling, especially that research is saying by 2050, we are going to witness more than 216 million people displaced due to climate crisis. And this, while it's really the ugly truth, and unless we do something, it will continue to be, but it's inspired me as much as it's inspired a lot of people, including our Director General in IOM, Amy Pop, who's a very energetic, innovative Director General, and she always empowered new ideas, where she approved initiating and creating climate mobility innovation labs. And the idea of the climate mobility innovation labs is to bring innovation and to bring solutions to Nadia and to millions like Nadia everywhere, starting by Africa and Asia. And the idea of the labs is not really a lab, but it have three main pillars. A pillar of innovation committee, where we can bring people like Nadia, but we can bring academia and science. Because as humanitarian, we cannot solve the droughts problem or the fires problem or the flooding problem, but science can bring it. But also bring technology, bring private sector who can support with early warning, early action, bring risk indexes, risk maps, and bring artificial intelligence to the room. Bring migrant voices, bring young people, governments, and come together to look into laboratory approach, piloting initiative that can create solution, go beyond the bag of food and the bottle of water. Sustained solution that can create results at scale. But also the lab will bring people together closer. They will do a peer-to-peer support cross countries, cross regional. People doesn't want organization to tell them what they do. They want to talk to each other cross countries, inspired and supported by local hand support on the ground, but with a global know-how. But also it will support an evidence-based advocacy. So instead of us sitting on forum advocating for people without hearing them, we will hear them, we will work with them, we will generate ideas and solutions, and then go to the forums in New York, in Geneva, and in others, in COPs, and say, okay, this is the solution that worked. This is the advocacy that we want to do. And from my very small experience, I think that this is the way to go. It's no more us telling people what to do, it's sitting with them and creating solution at a scale, and this is the way to go. But this also inspired Kampala Declaration, which is, again, countries has to come together in the same region, because every region has its own context, culture, problems, ideas, and it needs to be respected. And IOM supported the governments in Africa to come together and sign a Kampala Declaration. 12 recommendations, 5 commitments. It's all about climate mobility. It's all about people, putting people at the heart of everything. listening to the voices of young people for 60% of Africa, but also listening to the voices of women groups, civil societies, who are the one who really implement this solution and make it true. And with that, we also have been supported by donors and partners and strategic partners that believe that this could happen. PRM supported us with a program to create innovative solution, to work on building the capacity and provide the know-how to communities, to young people, but also to governments, support national adaptation plan, invest in evidence and data that can help us look into push factors, pull factors, trends, but localized early warning to minimize the implication of loss on people without early warning. They don't know the know-how, they don't have solution, they don't know what to do. If I went, I'm Egyptian myself, if I went to a small village in my country and I told people, flooding is happening tomorrow, you have to move, they will tell me, okay, inshallah. And they will never move. People need to know, people need to have the capacity, but also need solution to help them, and they need to feel that this is their own decision. And this is the project in Kenya where we started is going to support with. But it also will provide people a choice to stay by providing livelihood and capacity building, knowledge and innovative information supporting the lab that can create and pilot programs that can create solutions at a scale. Again, we also invested in partnership with private sector, because private sector is not just a donor or someone to come and to provide machines and tools. In COP this year, we were very astonished to see the private sector sitting on the table with donors, with countries, with migrants, with refugees, and speaking a different narrative of respectful strategic partnership. And we believe that this is the way to go. And I'm so glad that I'm here today presenting the hat of one of the agencies of IOM, but also presenting the hat of a citizen that believe that the voices of people need to be heard and they have to be part on every decision making and part of the solution. Thank you so much.
Rania, thank you so much for reiterating and closing out the panel speakers before we have our closing speaker. But you finished up where we started, which is talking about listening and just listening to where the issues are, listening to the affected populations, coming up with respectful solutions that bring together the ideas and the context to support jobs, to support education, to support investment, to support private sector solutions, taking into account the refugee voices and learning about how climate is affecting mobility and refugees and so many other things. So we have, I know we started late and we do have a final speaker who's going to be fabulous for 5 minutes, but I think we have time for one, maybe two questions if you keep them brief. So if you've got a question, could you raise your hand and we'll get a microphone out to you. Or we could just give our final speaker a little bit extra time because he's awesome. So if there are no questions, going once, going twice. Oh, we have a question. Can we get a microphone up here in the front, please?
I think the question that I have as someone in the public sector and as a nonprofit is, of course, the question, how can I help? And so I just want to say that Miles for Migrants is inspired by the work that each of you are doing, the comprehensive, innovative work that you're doing. And we're also ready to help in many ways. And what comes to mind for me is particularly as we look at, for example, tent partnership and the employee network, employer and employee network. There's opportunities for employees right down to the individual to help refugees coming into the country. On the education sector as well, we have students, we have faculty, we have alumni who should be equally inspired by the Welcome Corps in the education sector. And so we just want to say, Glide and myself, that we are also ready to help and try to think through innovation of how to help you as well. So thank you for inspiring us all.
Thank you. We'll do here and then here.
Thank you so much for the amazing panelists. I'm Ali Al-Jundi from Refugee Congress and happy to see, listening to all these. The question is about partnership among the panelists. Are you thinking of building some kind of networking, collaboration? And I know there are other organizations like Upward Global working not to create the wheels, but create some kind of collaboration among these partners.
I love that question, and I also love the offer of support. So we're on that. And I think that what we know is that we can be a resource-rich environment, and yet individuals and groups don't know where to access them, don't know who to contact, and it can be confusing. And so that's one of the roles that the President's Alliance really wants to support, and that the SHARE Consortium. So of course, I was already talking to Scarlett about some more partnerships that we should be engaged in. On the higher ed immigration portal, and if you have things that you think could be of benefit to campuses engaging in refugee resettlement, we need some consolidated places. And I think that I really thank the leadership of the State Department for recognizing that yes, we need to increase capacity, but to do what you're saying, we actually need to make sure it's not duplicative, that there's a synergistic energy. So absolutely, and would love to connect with people to do more.
Hi. I've already. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Fabiana Goyeneche. I come from Montevideo, Uruguay. So as I'm representing a local government and also a city network from Latin America called Mercociudades, I'd like to ask either to Refugee Investment Network or the IFC in these multi-stakeholder associations that you've been talking about and telling us today, if you have any experience on working with local governments, and what would be your suggestion for this kind of city networks to get involved in what you do? Thank you.
Thanks so much. The short answer is we have done some work with local government. Most of it's been focused in East Africa at the moment. Last year we put out a study looking at how secondary cities in countries can attract investment for the refugees that were moving in there. Secondary cities take on a larger relative share of refugees than primary cities in a lot of countries. And so the short answer is yes, we are interested and are actively engaged with mayors, councils, and that sort of thing. At least in East Africa, we've done less work in South America, though.
So I'll add on to that. In Kenya, when I was talking about Kakuma, we're working hand in glove with UNHCR and the local, the states in the county of Kakuma. There has been change in government, and we're continuing to work. Yes, when there's a change in government, things are always fraught, but we're working with the county government. In Latin America, I know that we worked in Colombia we worked with the local county governments in Colombia in the movement of Venezuelan refugees through Colombia, and some of the licensing and registration that was achieved was working with our colleagues at the World Bank, with the government, both at national and state level, to ensure that there was sort of seamless work. And in Kenya right now, we're trying to do that, to also see that we can, together with PRM, look at a development network for Northern Kenya. So it's something that we're all doing. We're picking places where we're seeing traction and moving things along.
So thank you for the questions. I know there are other hands up. I apologize, there won't be time, but hopefully our panelists can stay for a little bit afterwards and you can have a private conversation. But I promised you a fabulous closing speaker. And so now I am very pleased to introduce Larry Sachs from the Development Finance Corporation to bring us home.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And thanks so much for our panelists for sharing your perspectives and your experiences on ways that we can build strategic partnerships and advance innovative solutions for refugee displacement. And if I could, I'd like to ask for a loud round of applause for all of our impressive panelists. Thank you. And just judging by that reaction, I'd say that we're all inspired by your work, deeply inspired, and we're even more motivated now to double down on our individual efforts to find creative solutions that can generate hope and opportunity for refugees and the communities that host them. So thank you again for your experiences. As your efforts have clearly shown, a successful and innovative approach depends upon using our privileged positions and our courage to build broader political support, deploy greater technical expertise, and of course, to offer more financial resources for some very complex settings. As a global community, we have a responsibility to step forward and help resolve the heartbreaking challenges faced by 110 million people around the world who have been displaced from their homes, including more than 35 million refugees. This is a gut-wrenching tragedy for those individuals and for their families. And make no mistakes, it's a collective tragedy for all of us and for society as a whole. We cannot prevail in our struggle to address unprecedented global crises without doing all that we can to help each one of us realize our potential. But the scope of the challenge is immense. While traditional humanitarian response is vital to saving lives and alleviating human suffering, it often focuses on immediate relief as opposed to long-term sustainable solutions, as many here have mentioned. And with good reasons, that's what it's there for. But to make a difference in the long term, to really turn the tide, we must also find ways to reach significantly larger numbers of refugees with support that truly makes a difference in their lives and offers not only access to urgently needed basic services, but also gives them hope for a better future. So we must be willing to engage with anyone and everyone who shares those goals. For me, from where I sit at the DFC and considering where I used to sit at USAID's Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, that also means proactively seeking creative solutions that harness the power of the private sector to spur job creation, offer dignified livelihoods, and find innovative ways to economically and socially integrate refugees into communities and connect them with needed services and economic opportunity, as others on the panel have noted. The private sector, especially when working in close collaboration with local governments or NGOs, and of course with refugees themselves, can offer populations on the move and refugees ways to access services and create livelihoods. Refugees often lack financial services that are critical to accessing food, education, healthcare, and working as entrepreneurs. And one model of partnership DFC has financed across 15 countries in Latin America, the Middle East, and Africa, helps refugees to establish a credit history through microfinance, coupled with the technical assistance to build entrepreneurial skills and then connect them to new markets. The fund aims to reach up to 200,000 borrowers in marginalized communities, with 70% of the beneficiaries expected to be women. Innovative public-private partnerships like these can enable refugees to build self-reliance, to create community, and to contribute to new and often unknown municipalities where they must begin again. They also positively contribute to the host economies and can break the dependency on traditional aid. Through loan guarantees, DFC, in close collaboration with USAID and PRM, is helping Venezuelan refugees in Colombia to achieve economic empowerment. The investment provides refugee women, too often overlooked, with business training and support to establish thriving microenterprises. The goal is not really about financing, but unlocking the unlimited potential within refugee communities by building on their skills that women already possess. And while we all want to see more, these partnerships are replicable if we invest enough into building out the more diverse coalitions of stakeholders needed to put them in place and to ensure that they succeed. Finally, we must work to elevate the voices of refugees, displaced persons themselves, and the communities that host them. Not just at conferences like these for public consumption, but also when all the cameras have moved. And it's clear that all of our panelists today are doing just that. And so while I'm encouraged by all the approaches discussed today, my call in closing this session would be for the international community, including my own agencies of the DFC and USAID, to consider how we can do more, how we can do it better, how we can learn from one another, and how we can put concrete action behind our commitments. So as we look to prioritize innovative ways to leverage the skills and resources, innovation and technology of the private sector to respond to these situations, and as we collectively help to lift the aggrieved, bolster economic growth, generate livelihood opportunities, and defend the sanctity of peace in the countries where we work, We also look forward to building new and more effective partnerships that mobilize private capital toward hope and opportunity for refugees, displaced populations, and the generous communities that host them. I think we heard some great examples of that today. I want to thank our panelists again and thank all of you for coming.